For your last game for Wales, we were there with you.
I was probably watching it in the stand at that time, but yeah. Again, it was a disappointing day because we ended up losing. We always used to beat Ireland in Dublin, and then a couple of years happened that Ireland would come over to Cardiff and beat us in Cardiff. So a bit of a strange time that was.
I remember it well because as we were walking around the track, we bumped into one of our lecturers, Dr. Keith Brain, who was there with the drugs in sport testing, which was in its infancy in those days, I think. So, yeah.
And only you, Jamie, could get a British line on and end up making it all about you.
It's not just thrown together, Gibbo.
Well, on that point, so, John, if you've listened to any of the other previous episodes, you'll know that one of the other reasons for coming on to the Aural Apothecary is to give our listeners a few things that evoke powerful memories for you. So the first thing we'd like to ask you is, would you like to give us a desert island drug? So this is something that evokes a powerful memory for you in whatever career you want to go with.
Yeah, I think this one is has a big relation to my sporting career as well. I suffer from bad cramps, leg cramps, and have done for many years. Developed it probably towards my late teens, and then, from there on. And from that time I was first playing for Wales, the then doctor of the WIU, a chap called Dr. Harold Richards, prescribed me some quinine tablets. From that day forward, I used to take one quinine tablet before every game to try to counter the cramps I used to get. So I took quinine for probably, from 1986, so yeah, right up to about 91, something like that. And when I went to Widnes in Rugby League, I switched from quinine to Slowkey. That's my sort of my drug of choice. Like I say, it's got a big link to my sporting, but you can't take it anymore, can you? It's banned.
Well, I was going to say to you, how's your eyesight?
Yeah, well, I'm okay with my malaria and stuff, but it's in terms of anything else, it's a shame that can only take tonic water and stuff like that now with quinine in. But yeah,
that's right. Yeah, or bitter lemon.
But
it's probably because you probably got. Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that's my choice of drug. So that's the one I.
It's a good one. I was going to say that's probably because you've got massive calves. I reckon your calves are probably as big as my thighs.
Yeah, some people have said it's a lot to do with my fast twitch fibres. I'm very anaerobic, and I'm a sprinter more than a long distance runner. So I used to hate training. I hated endurance running. But I have got very big quads and hamstrings. And funny enough, when I was playing, didn't have drugs testing. You mentioned that earlier, Jamie, and they didn't have drugs testing in my day. But then when I went to Rugby League, they started doing the drugs testing. And at Wembley one time, I was playing in a big game. And at the end of the game, they tell you there, you've been selected, your number's out of the hat, you're going to be drugs tested. And I thought, oh, God. It used to take me about 2.5 hours, 3 hours to go to urinate, first time. So you pile in lager, anything you can find, just drink as much as you can. And literally, they had to follow me to the after dinner meal. They sat by me. I think they were offered a meal as well. Wherever I went, they followed me, and I obviously eventually, about honestly 2.5, 3 hours, I said, right, I think I'm ready. So they come to the toilet with you, and obviously, they're making sure that you're doing the deed, and so that's. But when you start, then that's the end of it. It's like opening the floodgates. Then I didn't stop going to the toilet all night.
I was going to say, once you start, you can't stop.
Yeah, exactly. But always used to happen to me in big games, like twice at Wembley, but yeah, drugs testing, nightmare. Can't imagine, these boys getting drugs tested regular,
When we arrived in Rugby World Cup, Japan for Rugby World Cup 2019, it was a harsh lesson that quinine is banned in Japan. And so all the gin that we'd bought on the way over was now, well, it wasn't quite redundant because you can't get decent tonic water in Tokyo. Problem all round.
Darren saved the day though, didn't he?
He did.
Ginger, we drank it with ginger ale. So great, we'll definitely take quinine into the Desert Island Drugs for the Aural Apothecary. That's great. And what about a career anthem then, John? I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, going back to my college days, I mean, you've all met at college, and when you go to college, you sort of meet friends for life. And, when I was in Cardiff College, I was first year in halls of residence, and in those days, you'd pal up with everyone, you'd spend a lot of time in whoever's rooms. And in those days, we used to have the ghetto blasters instead, none of this, digital stuff. And one of the tunes I used to always blare out, and it was my go-to song, was Simple Minds, Alive and Kicking. That's a song that I used to love playing, and it's a good song to sort of train to, and headphones on and listening if you're on your bike or whatever. But yeah, that's my go-to song. And we used to have these drinking sessions on a Wednesday night in college, where we'd go down to the Discovery, a pub down. There was a shop down by the Discovery pub in Kincoid, and buy a cheap bottle of wine, a light Leaf Rubber Milch or a Blue Nun, and buy a bottle of wine for £1, I think. And then we'd go back to the college, pick somebody's room, and we'd watch Dallas every Wednesday night. And we used to play drinking games for Dallas, because in Dallas, Mary, they're always drinking. Sue Ellen was drinking. She couldn't keep a glass of whatever out of Sue Ellen's. So whenever they drunk, we drunk. So
okay.
But it was a sort of a warm-up session for the main session in the student union bar later on. Obviously, we got a little bit tippled, and it was a cheaper night then, obviously.
Yeah, Alive and Kicking by Simple Minds. That'll sound great on the Spotify Aural Apothecary playlist, I must say. Excellent. And what about a book then, John?
Again, didn't really read, many books other than autobiographies in my early days. I think the first autobiography I ever read was Gareth Edwards, and then JPR's. But in terms of books that had an influence on my career in college, it was Barbara Knapp, Skill in Sport. This book sort of bridged the gap between pure psychological research and the acquisition of recreational physical skill. So it formed the basics of the science of sport. And one of the lecturers there, Leighton Davis, or Nutty as he's known, the rugby coach of the college, always used to quote bits out of that book. And there was a very famous quote in there: when fatigue sets in, skill goes out the window. It's just one of the quotes in the book, but it was used quite a lot in a lot of the lectures. Yeah, it's an old book, but it's one of the first books that actually did bridge the gap between the psychological and the actual skill.
Great, absolutely.
I mean, that fatigue is, that's what we've learned about in healthcare in the last 10 years, isn't it? The human factor stuff is that we know that when that fatigue...
Yeah, I mean, you can train as much as you like as a rugby player, and play as a rugby player, but obviously as soon as fatigue sets in, it all goes out the window, doesn't it? Everything goes, your concentration, the execution.
Yeah, from junior doctor to professor, if they're fatigued, then they might make an error that you wouldn't expect them to make. Yeah. So it's the same thing, really, isn't it? Yeah, excellent. We'll take that. Skill in sport. Very good. Okay, our micro discussion next. Let's take you back again, this time to a paper published in the summer of last year. That's 2020 for the archives. Looking at the use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs in recreational runners taking part in Parkrun UK. Published in the International Journal of Pharmacy Practice by Craig Rosenblum and colleagues. Who's going to kick us off with this one? Well, you're the park runner, aren't you, James?
All right, I will. I'll say a few words about parkrun to start with. So I am a park runner, and I think I'd done parkrun probably number 51, I think, or 52, just before lockdown, before COVID hit last March. Before we get onto the medicine side of what the paper describes, parkrun it's just an amazing event. Who else has... Gimmo, you've done a few parkruns, haven't you, as well? I'm guessing. It's a 5K event, but the community that develops, the friendships that you make, sit in there on a Saturday morning, having a coffee with your mates, having made the effort to get up in the morning. You've done your 5K and now you're having a chat. It was one of the best feelings of the week. Me and many others miss it massively, I think. And so, yeah, I can't wait for it to return. Doing a parkrun on a Saturday morning was a real barometer for what week you'd had. So back in the days when you were doing overnighters in London and things like that, you knew if the parkrun would let you know whether you drunk too much in the week, eaten too much in the week, or been to too many buffets and too many meetings, really. Yeah, looking forward to it coming back. The paper itself is talking about non-steroidal use. I must confess, I've never run far enough where I felt the urge to take a non-steroidal during a race. So, that's about my limit.
One of the things the paper talks about, isn't it, is, it's talking about obviously the risks of non-steroidals versus the benefits, but it does say a couple of times in there, I think I've underlined it here, is however it's possible that NSAIDs may enable participation in exercise. I'm in my, let's say, late 40s. With a bit of a dodgy knee. So I'm one of the people in here who has taken, and I actually know one of the people who wrote this, and he sort of does a lot of work around NSAIDs in exercise, and he worries about it a lot in terms of heart disease and kidney failure and this sort of thing. But I must admit, if I didn't occasionally take an NSAID. I mean, John, you mentioned it. I've read that you've done the CAR-10 and things like that. I could never have done those sort of things. I've done that as well, and I could never do those sort of things if I hadn't taken a few NSAIDs to sort out my knee beforehand, or that's at least what I think anyway. So it's that balance, isn't it, between the risk, but obviously doing something like parkrun, as you just described, Jamie, has massive health benefits in terms of your well-being and stuff. Those benefits are worthwhile, I think.
John, what was non-steroidal use like for rugby players back in the day?
Just kept it going. In my life revolved about, certainly after, more so probably rugby league, just to give you an insight into how my body used to feel after playing on a Sunday, because most rugby league games were always on a Sunday. I couldn't probably walk, or I certainly felt all the bumps and bruises still on a Tuesday. So yeah, I mean, the game was very physical, especially going from rugby union to rugby league and not being brought up playing it. So yeah, my life revolved around taking NSAIDs, and in the early days there was the usual stuff, but towards the towards in the middle part of my career and the end of my career, there was some, obviously the COX-2s were out there. I actually did promote a COX-2 called Acoxia, very, very 90 and 120. It actually had 120 had an indication for gout, I think.
Yeah, still going.
Yeah, but there's limited use because of they did find some side effects or adverse events and stuff.
Yeah, cardiovascular. Yeah.
But yeah, funny story. I kind of just got into the pharmaceutical industry, and I started with a little company called Innovex, or Quintiles as they are now, or IQVIA now, sorry. They used to run the Innovex 7s down in Marlow.
On the Thames?
That's right, and I was asked to play in this by my boss, and as you do, ex-international and everything, and I was the ringer for the side. And I woke up in the morning and drove up with my wife up from Bridgend up to London. And I just said to my wife, I don't think I'm going to be able to play. My knee's killing me. It just... Did
you forget your quinine, John?
I must have, yeah. And I literally got there, and I was going to have to say to Mike, my boss, Mike, I just can't play. My knee's killing me. And he just gave me this Vioxacute tablet. Try that, he said. And I took it, and I couldn't believe it. It was miraculous. The pain just went.
Bloody cured me, he did.
Yeah, he bloody cured me. What a salesman. But and that was my story. It was a true story. I managed to play in the tournament, and we lost in the bloody semi-final. It was pretty difficult because it was all sorts of
short half-life Vioxacute. That's the thing.
So I'm going to say something quite academic here, because I know I don't always do this, but I've read this paper as well. And I hear everything that everyone's saying. And these are N=1 studies, though. These are people saying that, yes, I took it and it improved. But even in this paper, I couldn't find any reference that said, we do know that it definitely works for injury prevention and fatigue and all the other things that it mentions. It doesn't actually say, even for elite athletes, that does actually work. And surely, if you've got so many people taking part in parkrun, which I agree is a great public health campaign, surely you've got the potential there to be able to run a study, almost a longitudinal study, to actually look at the effects of that. That's what I thought when I read it anyway.
I think, people, especially the elite athletes, they're still searching for that, aren't they? They're still hoping that it does actually either enable them to train more or train harder for longer, and that potential performance enhancing bit.
There'll be a huge placebo effect in there, won't there?
Yeah. Well, that's my point. You can only do it by doing a longer, rigorous study to be able to find out the answer to that. Because otherwise, the other point that it's trying to make is that if we don't provide some healthcare advice to people, they'll just do what everybody else appears to be doing. And that's what happens with medicines like this, isn't it? Well, John takes it and Jamie takes it, so I'll take it without realizing that I or that person may have a condition that actually means that it's a bad idea for them to take it. And I think this is what the paper's trying to say, isn't it? There should be better public health messaging at these park runs. Yes, they're great for public health, but we've got to think about, we can't just allow people to just continue to do what everyone else that they're running with who are not scientists.
For the record, I don't take it. But anyway, patient information leaflets are the most common source of information, followed by doctors, physios, the internet, friends and family, then pharmacists, then coaches, then osteopaths and podiatrists.
Then podcast.
Here we are. John, just before we finish on this subject, then I suppose it's a tenuous link, but non-steroidals and injuries. Your work as a trustee of the Welsh Rugby Former International Players Association, what does that look like?
It's a registered charity, REX, ex-international. It's basically a charity set up to help any injured, any ex-internationals that fall on hard times, or illness. And it's only for ex-Welsh internationals. There are other charities out there, like the Charitable Trust, that look after all players that play rugby. And the Welsh Rugby Union, I think they did have, I'm not sure if it's still running, they did have a charity as well. But it was set up by some of the ex-players. We all know all well, Gareth Edwards, JPR Williams, Mervyn Davis, JJ Williams, John Taylor, John Dawes, and they've sort of tried to get some new blood introduced to the board. So myself, Craig Quinnell, Paul